Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about chapter 3 of Isaiah, and remember 2 through 4, chapters 2 through 4 is a unit, and we talked about the first Zion poem. If I ever say Zion poem, if I say first Zion poem, I'm referring to chapter 2, 1 through 5. Remember that? Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. The law will go forth from Zion. That is what I call the first Zion poem. And chapter 4, the 2 through 4 will end with the second Zion poem. But right now we're going to talk about chapter 3, which is talking about the reality of Israel. Which this section already began from chapter 2 verse 6, but that chapter 2 was more about in general terms. But in chapter 3 we're going to talk about the sins of Judah and the judgment coming in a little bit more of a specific terms. The prophet's going to give us a little more specific details, so pay attention to that. Okay, all right. Verse 1. For behold, the Lord God of hosts is taken away from Jerusalem and from Judah support and supply, all support of bread and all support of water. The mighty man and the soldier, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor and the skillful magician and the experts in charms. So what's happening here? Isaiah is mentioning some men, like mighty men, soldiers, and so on, that is gonna be judged. Okay, so you need to read this in context. Chapter 2, remember, it was about trusting like gold horses, idols, and lofty mountains, and all that. And then, but God kept saying, on that day the Lord alone will be exalted. And chapter 2 ended with that phrase, stop regarding men in whose nostrils is breath. So chapter 2 ended with a warning against trusting in men, right? Such human dependence will not lead to the realization of the destiny depicted in the first Zion poem. Remember, that was kind of the point of it. In chapter 3, we're going to get more into it. To make great men the source of a nation's greatness is always to end up with a dearth of great men. Okay? How so? Verse 4. And I will make boys their princes, and infants shall rule over them. God's going to make boys their princes, infants shall rule over them. So infants can't rule a government. They're too young. And boys being princes is also not the most ideal. So it's probably a figurative way of saying incompetent. The incompetence gaining positions of authority due to the lack of a leadership. So again, chapter 2 talked about how people were trusting in humans in whose nostril is merely breath. And chapter 3 is now going more in details that there's gonna be a lack of people to trust, lack of people to lead. So much so that infants are gonna be leaders. Okay? In the near future, we're probably having King Manasseh in mind, who began to rule Judah at the age of 12. But really, it's that's just like an interim fulfillment more. But really, the full fulfillment will come later. Verse 5. And the people will oppress one another, everyone his fellow, and everyone his neighbor. The youth will be insolent to the elder, and the despised to the honorable. For a man will take hold of his brother in the house of his father, saying, you have a cloak, you shall be our leader, and this heap of ruins shall be under your rule. In that day he will speak out, saying, I will not be a healer. In my house there is neither bread nor cloak. You shall not make me leader of the people. For Jerusalem has stumbled and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. So what's happening? In the future sometime, a man is going to take hold of his brother, saying, hey, you have a cloak. It seems like you have these clothes. You have these special clothes. You want to be our leader? Like, what a pathetic reason to have to make someone king over yourself. You have these clothes, right? So people are going to be looking for someone to lead. But what's that person going to say? I will not be a healer. He doesn't want to. I don't want to be your leader. I don't want to be your king. Why? Because Jerusalem is lying in desolate. Jerusalem has stumbled, Judah has fallen. Like, what's the point of being a king of a destroyed country? I don't want to be a leader. So it's a very miserable state where everybody is looking for someone to be the leader, but nobody wants to be leader because it means you're going to be the leader of like the worst destroyed country in the world. That's the kind of situation that's going to come. Okay? Again, why? Because Judah is regarding men. Okay, Judah is putting his trust in man, not in God. And so the punishment, the judgment is going to be the opposite of it, where there's going to be a lack of men to lead. Okay, verse 9. For the look on their faces bear witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil on themselves. Tell the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their deeds. Woe to the wicked, it shall be ill with them, for what his hands have dealt out shall be done to him. My people, infants are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, your guides mislead you, and they have swallowed up the course of your pants. This is very interesting. So what's happening here is that God is proclaiming their sin, right? Woe to them. But look at verse 10. Verse 10 is super interesting. Tell the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their deeds. Verse 11. Woe to the wicked. So, did you get that? So God is going, woe to them, woe to them, woe to the wicked. He's covering all this terribleness of the people. But in verse 10, we suddenly have this sign of hope. Tell the righteous that it shall be well with them. So all these people who are prideful, trusting in men, they're going to be judged. Terrible stuff is going to come upon them. But, hey, you righteous people that are doing well, tell the righteous people that it shall be well with them. They shall eat the fruit of their deeds. So there will remain a faithful minority who would not get lost in the judgment. You see that? So the whole country is unrighteous, but there's going to be some righteous people, and the Lord will remember them and send them good. So this way of talking, where Isaiah is talking about all these terrible things that's coming, and then he suddenly throws in this random gleam of hope. This occurs often in Isaiah in the book of Isaiah. It's his way of writing, because for him the judgment isn't the end. The destruction isn't God's goal of judgment. Judgment, as I said, is a means of reaching the ideal state of Israel as explained in the first Zion poem or elsewhere in the ideal state. But judgment, the purification process has to come. So it's a judgment of hope. It's going to hurt, it's going to be destructive, but there's hope. So to remind the readers that this important fact, Isaiah keeps throwing these little pieces of hope here and there, okay? You're going to see this more often, but chapter 3 verse 10 is one example of it. Okay, verse 13. The Lord has taken his place to contend. He stands to judge peoples. The Lord will enter into judgment with the elders and princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor? Declares the Lord God of hosts. Now we see God is going to enter into judgment. So the times of trial, or the day of the Lord, will first begin with trial and then followed by judgment. This is the pattern we see also in the New Testament. Verse 16. The Lord said, it's a little different from verse 16. The Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly with their eyes, mincing along as they go, tinkling with their feet. Therefore the Lord will strike with a scab the heads of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will lay bare their secret parts. So now we have a different audience, perhaps, here. The Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty. Now we're talking about the daughters of Zion. Who are the daughters of Zion? This is much debated. Okay, who are the daughters of Zion? First option is the female, the women that are living in Israel, the Israelite women. Okay? Second option of understanding this is that daughter of Zion really refers to all of Israel. Israel is described in a feminine term to illustrate the different side of her problem, like prostitution, spiritual prostitution. So Israel is now personified as daughters of Zion. That's another way of doing it. Okay? I think, yeah, these two are both possible. I think they're both viable options. Almost all commentators see this to be an indictment of the women of Jerusalem, like the actual female residents of Jerusalem. And it makes sense. It makes sense because in the beginning of chapter 3, we have the mighty man, the soldier, judge, prophet in verse 2, the diviner, elder, and captain of 50. So we have the men of Israel, Jerusalem, that's being talked about their sins. And here we're talking about the women of Israel to give the point that it is the whole nation of Judah that is guilty, not just the men or the leaders. Okay? So now, whether it be referring daughters of Zion is just an umbrella term, a feminine way of referring to Israel, or actually the women of Israel, doesn't matter. It's the comprehensive nature of the nation's sin that's being talked about, and it's talked in terms of prostitute. The daughters of Zion are like prostitute, or maybe prostitution itself is being condemned. Either way, the language here is this prostitute sinning against God's will. Okay, but let's read on a little more. Verse 18, in that day the Lord will take away the finery of the anklets, the headbands, the crescents, the pendants, the bracelets, the scarves, the headdresses, the armlets, the sashes, the perfume boxes, and the amulets, and the signet rings, nose rings, festal robes, the mantles, the cloaks, and the handbags, the mirrors, the linen garments, the turbans, and the veil. So God's going to take away these accessories that the daughters of Zion are wearing. But here, whenever you see a long list of words like this, or long list of names, genealogy and so on, I strongly advise that you count it. You count how many items are listed or how many names are listed, because if you count, most oftentimes it ends up being a special number. For example, in 18 and through 23, all the accessories that they're wearing, and if you count them, it adds up to 21. Okay, the Lord condemns 21 personal items, personal decorations that evidence pride. But the important thing is that 21, now you have to think, where do we see 21 in the Bible? Or what is it, multiplication of? What are the factors of 21? And long story short, it's 7 times 3. 7 signifies completeness. 3 also signifies full measure. 7 times 3 is it's a way of saying completely. This daughters of Zion is completely sinful, totally sinful. That's the point of it. Okay. So these 21 items signifies full measure of sin that the daughters of Zion have committed. Reading on. 24. Instead of perfume, there will be rottenness, and instead of a belt, a rope, and instead of a well-set hair, baldness. Instead of a rich robe, a skirt of sackcloth, and branding instead of beauty. Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty men in battle, and her gates shall lament and mourn. Empty she shall sit on the ground. End of chapter 3. But keep reading on to chapter 4, verse 1. And 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach. This is the end of the section. Okay. So God's gonna take away all these beautiful ornaments and give them skirt of sackcloth instead. So it's a terrible situation that they're gonna be after the judgment. But here, chapter 4, verse 1 is kind of interesting. 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. So what's happening? Well, war is coming, right? In the previous verse we said, your men shall fall by the sword. So war often results in the decimation of men, But women who are left alone need that guardianship, that companionship, and the support that comes from being married to a man, right? In that society, if a woman is alone, she's very unprotected, as in a very risky, unstable situation. So 7 women will come to one guy and say, I don't care if I'm your 7th wife, can I please be your wife? And you don't have to give me any bread or clothes. I will pay for my own food. Can I just be married to you? Like, that's already terrible to listen to that, but this is actually an echo of the reversal of what originally designed marriage to be. God designed marriage to be that man provides for the woman. And we see that in Exodus 21, verse 10. It says, if he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. Okay, when a man takes a wife for himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights, meaning he should provide for her. But here in Isaiah, we see that that's the opposite. Women come and say, I will provide for myself, can I please be married to you? So it's a meltdown. It's a destruction of the order that God had placed for people to function within the marriage. That's how terrible the judgment is going to be, how terrible and how miserable people will be because of their trust in people and their sin that they have committed. This is end of chapter 3 and verse 1 of chapter 4. This is the end of the realistic judgmental part. And from the next verse, we're going to go into the hopeful second song of Zion.